This show contains strong language. If you're a sensitive little bitch, we recommend you change the station immediately so your little girl feelings don't get hurt.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's the Paydirt Football Show.
Are you trying to give me the double talk?
You talk too much.
And now, sit back and listen to 2 hours of biased, brainless blithering sure to drop your sports IQ by at least 20 points.
7 years of college down the drain.
Paydirt is on the air.
All right, welcome to Paydirt. It's not going to be 2 hours because we've got the free version of things going here. So probably going to be about a half hour, maybe a little longer than a half hour. But we're going to talk about the PAFL and some rule changes that might be coming up for vote soon. So Calvin, first up, I've got your list here, and first up is different alternatives to determine the rookie draft order. So let's talk about that for a while.
Yes, good evening to those out there, and Len and Joe. I'm glad that we can do this. Joe and I were chatting, a couple months ago, and we thought it would be good to do a show like once a month, particularly during the season. So in option number one, we're talking about rookie draft, and this is a rare league for me that does not do a lottery. So I figured we would just do discussion and talk about pros or cons. And as the new commissioner, I have to be careful. Like, people may listen to this and think I've got an agenda, but to kind of push everything to the side, all of our rule votes take 17 affirmative votes to hit that threshold of 60%. And our most recent vote, if you notice, I only voted on one thing. All the rest I abstained, and the only reason I voted on the one, I thought it was a bad rule for the league long term. And that rule was to trade draft picks 2 years in the future. And who wants to take over a team that's in the gutter with no draft picks coming up next year? So that's why, that's the only exception. I probably, but I thought it was fair to put it out there to get people's pulse, and it almost passed. If I didn't vote no, it would have passed.
Yeah, and here's why. Because people like to make changes to their team as much as they can. They don't take into account if they quit and someone else has to take over that team. They don't worry about that.
No, they don't, because, Jeff in the past, somebody, the league will pick up and carry forth.
Right.
I want to avoid that.
Yeah, and I didn't like that rule. I think I voted against it too, just for the same reason. It's easy for someone to ruin their team, give away all their draft picks, and then leave the scraps for someone else. Joe, what's your thoughts?
Well, my thought is that it wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and to allow the trading of 2 years worth of draft picks at the time of that present draft. The reason I say that is that if you're looking to build in another league that I'm in, for instance, it's a very common trade is to trade my second this year for a first next year. And so you eliminate that trade. Now, I understand the whole thing. You don't want to give somebody a whole year to go ahead and trade those draft picks and to trash their team. But I think that during the time of the draft, you should be able to trade 2 years. But it is what it is. It's not a tragedy not being able to.
It could. Yeah. Go ahead, Calvin.
I was going to say, now that I got us off track, but we can finish this thought. Go ahead, Len.
Well, I was going to mention that. He mentioned, maybe when it got close to the draft, you could do that. And that is a possibility sometime maybe we could consider that, because you're really only barely out of a year. But the problem is that, it's still, you got to think about the good things and the bad things that can come from a rule change like that. I'm not sure even if that point, I'm not against it or for it at this point. Show me where it benefits, and, I'm for any rule.
Right. And Joe's perspective on that rule is the only one that I would think is tolerable, because you're trading him right then. So it's really no different. Okay, so the difference is you trade these draft picks during our rookie draft instead of right after the rookie draft, then you can trade them anyway. So that's why I like Joe's point of view on that, it's not like it's a real 2 years ahead. It's more like, hey, maybe 2 weeks before the rookie draft or during, you could trade draft picks.
And here's one of the drawbacks I see with that, is the problem that being that you could have an abundance of draft picks to trade all at once, you may be, some owners, not all of them, may be much more prone to give away the farm for this year. And
Yes.
and that's never a good. I mean, look what the Saints happened when the Saints went after Ricky Williams, and they gave everything away for him, and then he smoked his dope out of the way, out of the league. So and we can run into those same issues with our leagues. You give too much for a player, and then next year he's gone. Whether he's hurt or like for instance, Michael Thomas, a wide receiver of mine, he was great for a couple of years, and then he was out for almost 2 years.
2 years, I think.
Yeah. So he becomes totally useless and just a space taker. Nothing for my team. And the problem is that that could become too much. Anyway, guys, talk. I got a phone call. I got to take it. Okay. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh no, that we kind of beat that subject. And like I said, it's not that big of a deal not to being able to trade the following year's draft pick. So,
Right.
Yeah, so it's not worth dwelling on too much.
Yeah, so we can talk a little bit about the lottery or not to lottery. As I started, this is like one rare league that I play in over many years that doesn't have a lottery. So why would we consider it? I mean, think about it. The incentive to lose is great in real life, and how much, even in games like this, you could say maybe people will throw the tank word out there, or you're not really motivated to win. So that would be a pro for a lottery of some sort. And then, you have to decide if the league wanted this again. So Calvin's not pushing anything here necessarily, just a discussion. How many teams do you include? I play in one league that takes the worst 4 records and ties and throws that into a lottery. You could do it also, throw every non-playoff team in the lottery and do something like the NBA. Thoughts like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. Most leagues that I'm in as well sit there and they use some sort of a lottery system. And to me, here's the pros. Number one, the idea that the team with the worst record is the worst team is not really true. Example, in our league. Does anybody really think Miami is one of the worst teams in the league? Or was it just that they happened to be in a division where everybody was very good? I would venture to say that there are some divisions that were weaker that would have some teams that were probably close to 500 that if they were to play 10 times against Miami, Miami would beat them at least 50% of the time.
Yes.
And then number two, you sit there, like you say, at the end of the season, when you have an incentive to lose, and I'm not talking like, weeks 10 or 11, I'm talking like weeks 16, 17, 15, 16, 17, where they're potentially playing a playoff team. That incentive to lose it can impact the rest of the division, rest of the league in terms of playoff positions, and whether or not a team makes it or not. And most year, I've seen quite a few very heated arguments. I mean, Calvin, you were. I remember you in a league where they sat there and somebody was accusing you of tanking, and that's a league where they even have a lottery. So, I think is doing as much as you can to eliminate that as a possibility is always positive.
And the con will be, they will say you can never eliminate tanking, and I agree. But at least in this case, if you're trying to tank and get that generational player, whoever that may be, and now you got to flip a coin, whether it's 4 teams, 5 teams, 8 teams. So you can tank all you want. You may get it or may not. And again, there are some people that just don't tank. So don't take this that Calvin's picking on certain people. I mean, there's some people in our league that I know they don't tank. They just go full out. I mean, Pete comes to mind at Pittsburgh. Pete just plays, tooth and nail every single game. But so it's just a discussion on that. So that was one idea on the lottery. The second one is really out there. And I actually played in a league started by Pat Crew, and Len will remember Pat Crew inside of PAFL. And Pat, he really doesn't like tanking. I'm in a league with him now, and he doesn't like tanking. So his idea was that at the end of the season, draft order is determined by, once the new disc comes out, team salary. And his approach, he threw everybody in the pot, playoff teams and non-playoff teams. And after 2 years, people didn't like it. And you can see why. You could win the Super Bowl and then Dak could be hurt, everybody could be hurt, and then you get the number one pick. Radical example. But I've seen modifications where maybe you could seed all the teams from last year in the PAFL that didn't make the playoffs. You just, as soon as the disc comes out, you look at their salary and you do the rookie draft by that. Again, just an idea. I'm sure it may not be liked, but those are the two ideas that I scripted on our notes.
Yeah, I can see where that might be a problem. I think the lottery is, if you're going to change up anything, I think that's probably the safest bet, because it's fair for all, and you just do the lottery when you can get number generators and things like that you could just go live on Zoom and say when you're going to do it live, and people are welcome to log in and watch it.
It's even simpler than that. I'm sorry, Joe. It's even simpler than that, Lynn, that you can just pick a state lottery, Florida lottery, Texas lottery on this draw on this day. But go ahead, Joe.
Oh, no, I was going to say, in one league that I know that when they do the lottery, they weighted, and out of 1,000 picks, the top team maybe gets 20%, and it goes down from there. It's a 20% chance. And at that point, nobody is sitting there. I mean, if you only got a 20% chance of winning the top pick, and you've got, and of course, the main times you're talking about that is when you have a franchise quarterback coming out into the league. If you have an incentive, if you know that the chances of you getting the top pick is probably not that great, you have very little reason to try to lose.
Right.
You have a better chance than somebody else. But if there's like 11 teams that's not making or 10 teams that's not making the playoffs, you obviously have, I think, a very real reason to play.
Yeah, I'm against tanking. That's a fact. I don't like it either. So the free agent draft, are we done with that one there?
Yes, we can talk about free agent draft versus free agent bidding.
Yeah, and the free agent draft is going to be a lot easier to do. The bidding process just takes so long. So this is, in my opinion, whatever the league wants. So,
well, in this one too, people have voted, and this has 18 votes, and that's perfectly fine. And I think Don mentioned in chat, why are you still talking about this? Doesn't everybody really know this? And I'm like, well, I think there's some unintended consequences, at least that people raised to me during their vote. Again, this is another one I didn't vote on. But for example, say you're Washington, and I know Andy won't take offense, but say you're Washington and you have to bid $15 million for that sixth player with his $2 million salary in the game. I mean, that's just thrown Washington, in my example, really in the tank. They paid way more than the card value. And you talk about competitive disparity. So that's one example. And I had another one, I think it was from Todd at San Francisco. He just said, all I just want to, it's kind of like a 100 carry running back, not a stud, but I don't want to pay 5, 6, 7, 8 million for this one little running back. So those are kind of the two, I'll call them like unintended consequences. Some of these teams, you'll have to find these players a different way, or if you bid a ton, you've just, Andy has no chance right this year, or my example, of competing when you got 15 million tied up into one player who's worth about 2 in the game.
Yeah. And I've talked to you about this, Calvin, and I probably have more opposition to this than most. And here's the reason why is I look at drafts as nothing more than you're trying to disseminate players to the teams in the league in a fair way, so that way the weakest teams get the better players. Now that's the goal. But then we decide to go ahead on top of that and play Let's Make a Deal. And the idea that the top teams, I mean, I sat and tried to sit there and do a mock draft for myself. And the player I probably would have ended up with if we had done a traditional draft, I sat there and said David Long. Now he's a 5-rated quarterback who's sitting there currently rated 50-something PFF. He's not going to change the direction of my team. The top players are going to go to the teams with the worst record. The thing about it is that those teams with the worst record are sitting there cannibalizing on each other. And certain guys like Andy, I mean, you have to be able to do active running math in your head, and a lot of guys just aren't good at it. And Calvin wasn't around on on Slack to sit there and to keep that draft in place. That's one reason I draft early, because I know it's going to be a cluster by the time it's done. People are not going to keep track of what they've bid on. They're not going to keep track of how much money they've spent or how many players they've won. Yeah.
What if we did something like this and we had broached this subject? Let's say the top worst teams, 10, let's say the top worst 10 teams would get an extra draft pick, maybe starting with, let's say the lowest salary team is $60 million. So he would be maybe at the end of the second round, an extra pick, and maybe the second guy too, and then one up for, the first 5 or up to maybe 10 worst teams. In other words, what it would be doing is giving them extra picks because they have so much salary room.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, I would even go so to add it on every round, because honestly, if you think you're going to turn around your team in free agency,
you're not. You're just filling holes.
Now, like this year, New England got the guy, Daniel Hunter. If it was me, I would have bid every dollar I had, and even if I had to do 350 scrubs, because to my opinion, Hunter was the guy head and shoulders above everybody else, even though he's got the injury risk. After that, you got these guys, Sidney Jones, I cut. David Long, I love Joe's example. I had to cut him. But, and I look at my career of free agent bidding, I think the best one I got in free agent bidding was actually a draft. I got Ronald Jones. And Ronald Jones gave me a 1,000-yard rusher last year. But other than that, I mean, this year he's on the bench.
Right.
So, I mean, we're splitting hairs over people that there's a lot of hype, but really there's not a ton of juice in this free agency stuff. I don't know.
No, really all the free agency can really do is make those worst teams competitive to where the owner's having fun. That's it.
Right. Yeah. You just grab some players, David Long, Sidney Jones. But like in Andy's case, he could have grabbed Sidney Jones for $2 million instead of whatever he paid. I think he had to go over 10 to get him. That's just a ton of money. And that was Andy's, I believe, his objection all these years before, we finally talked him into bidding, is like, you're just throwing all this money and then, he's locked into super high salary, can't really trade, no flexibility.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, look at New England. Okay, now Don, he likes the bidding. But right now, if you wanted to make a trade with him, he's up against the salary cap. Now, he's mostly the reason he's up against the salary cap is because he overpaid for players in free agency. But, is that really represented? I mean, is the goal to cripple weaker teams to where they can't make moves because they overpaid for free agents that we're going to get the values adjusted the following year? But I mean, we're not talking earth-shattering players that are going to build your franchise. There's a few players that I always look at it like, okay, I can I find a 350 player who can turn around and become a 5 or a 6 rated star player on my team and maybe be a backup in time. That, to me, that's success.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're going to compensate the bad teams in any way other than just draft order, I think the extra draft picks is probably the best option to go with.
Yes. And then they don't end up overbidding for these mediocre,
Yeah, well, there'd be no bidding.
5. Yeah,
right.
You just pick them up. And then as a commissioner, you don't get the Team X. There we have way too many bids out there, and this, that, and we need to reset it.
I mean, there was.
I'm not gonna reset this darn draft. You know how much work that is. That's crazy.
And in this year, I'm not going to call out the owner, but there was a guy who was literally waiting until hour 24 to put the bid in for the next player, and then he missed it one time by 10 minutes and was upset that his bid got and you and Calvin and you and Len sat there and kind of set it straight. But it's those type of shenanigans that sit there and just take what it should be a fairly simple process of here's your time slot, draft your player, go to the next round. When I personally don't care what round, because if my team is successful, hey, I'll grab a guy. And that's the other thing too, is that some guys, I think they through this bidding, they purposely don't scout players. They got somebody else to do the scouting for them. And it's like, you need to do some of your own scouting and figure out your own team. I was talking to a team, and again, I'm not going to name names, but where they were sitting there and they were bidding. I put up a player and they're bidding, and I said, look, you're shopping at Neiman Marcus. You've got a lot of money, and then you're sitting around looking at me. I'm a Dollar General. No, the players I'm looking at, you shouldn't even be worried about. You can
You're
get
like me, Joe.
done.
We can only shop at the 350 store. So I started with like a punter with a pulse and somebody else with a pulse. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm at 5 and below. You're a target, or at least, at the mall. I can't go there.
So what was this D here? Not having to release players?
yeah, so here's the one. So like on our rules, there's a maximum number of rushes, receptions, passes. And about, I think it was 2 seasons ago, maybe 3, that I remember vividly, and this is in our old chats, even you can find this, that Jeff had forced Eric of Minnesota that said, hey, you've got too many rushes here. You're over the 500 number or 550, whatever it was.
Right.
You got to release that running back before free agency. And Eric did it. It was fine.
Yeah.
Very next year, though, same situation comes up. And this, Jeff does some research and says, hey, well, the rules really don't explicitly say that, even though we did it last year.
Mm-hmm.
So we changed. And that brings us to this year, which is the 3rd iteration. And I'm not picking on Andy, but right now he's got the vivid example. He's got Bridgewater and he's got Wentz. So he's way over our new passing number, which I forget what it is 800. But the rules as written allow this. So he could hang on to Bridgewater. And the only way it hurt him in bidding, because Bridgewater would tie up $7 million of his salary.
Mm-hmm.
He's not been able to trade Bridgewater. The other trouble he has, there's very few teams that he could actually trade Bridgewater to and be under our max.
There are no teams you can trade him to. If you go through roster, I've sat there and I've looked.
Yes.
There is not a team in the league that can trade for Bridgewater.
There's one though.
Oh, is there? I mean,
The Giants could give up on Baker Mayfield. If you give up on your current starting quarterback, then the Giants come to mind.
I'd get rid of Wentz and keep Bridgewater.
Well, Andy likes Redskins.
I know, and that's he has, and that can do him in sometimes because he's such a fan that he sticks with the Commanders or whoever they are now this week.
Yes, I'm sorry. Did I say Redskins?
That's all right. I still do call him that all the time because I'm 63 and that's all I've known him as hardly, for most of the time.
Exactly.
But
so I just want to be sure Andy knows. Andy hasn't done anything wrong, but it's just an example. Like if the rules were stricter, he would have had to release Bridgewater. But if you play that scenario out, he would have released Bridgewater. Nobody would have picked him up because he can't give Bridgewater away before our cut down. He couldn't give it away for a 7th.
Well, I can tell you right now, looking at the percentages, and this meeting's going to be over in 10 minutes, and we want to save 5 for us afterward. So if you look at the percentage-wise, he's got 66 versus 62. Touchdowns 27, only 18. So the touchdowns are bad and the interceptions are up. But Wentz isn't going to be worth a damn next year. Bridgewater, isn't he still starting?
No, he was out with a concussion. In fact, he fell to 3rd string.
Oh, did he?
Okay. Skylar Thompson was playing.
Gotcha. Okay, well, neither one of these guys.
Yeah, the other trouble that would bite Andy in your scenario, if he cuts Wentz, he can only sign 350 players. Mm-hmm. So he needs another quarterback for a handful of games.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
I don't know which one of these I get rid of. I wouldn't want either one of them, really. I mean, Wentz, he's trash, too.
Yeah, he's hurt now, so now it'll be interesting if...
Yeah, that's convenient.
Heineke or something.
Heineke.
Or Howell, yeah.
Heineke. But Heineke's better than Wentz.
I don't know about that.
No,
That's hard to say.
He's better.
I'm not a Washington expert.
I'm an expert on Washington because I have to deal with Washington fans all the time in D.C. So
I think that's our main topics before going to the draft. I didn't know if Joe had any thoughts on, this rule. I don't think Joe was here when Eric had a release of that running back, the scenario I was talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
everything that we've talked about tonight should go up for a vote, and if it's already passed, then make it happen. I mean, one of the things I think I talk about more is the free agency thing about possibly giving the crappy teams extra picks, and then determine what's fair, what's right, if at all, what those should be. So that's one of the things I think really needs further conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we just need 17 votes to say we'll
Yeah.
go free agent draft, and here's some spin that we didn't put on it. Additional picks for, say, I don't care, make it easy. Every team that didn't make the playoff, the 4 worst teams, however they want to do that, they get an extra pick at the end of each round.
I think, well, here's what I would think. That I think the top 5, the worst 5 teams gets an extra pick, maybe at the end of the first round. The second 5 gets an extra pick at the second round. The end of the second round.
mean,
that's what I'd
I'm
do.
not-
But
yeah.
that discuss that too.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly put out there if we were to redo a free agent draft with some modification of compensation, additional picks, and I don't know if we get the votes, but we could always do it. I don't know if people would be upset because they kind of already voted one over the other.
Mm-hmm.
They had the votes.
Yeah.
In fact, I think they had an extra vote.
You mean for the draft instead of yeah?
And then they went for bidding.
Oh, they did.
Bidding passed.
Oh, okay.
Big time, like 18 votes. if I
Well,
remember
if you
right.
put the other spin on it, might change.
Right.
Well, and plus also, I mean, to be honest with you, this is one case where I think you, Calvin, should be able to have a preemptive vote, because guess what? If you hadn't been around and had stopped like maybe 5 transactions, 6 transactions, that would have descended into total chaos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, that's
Well,
one
we're
reason
used
I
to total
drafted.
chaos.
Well, I know,
poor
but
Jeff.
but I mean, somebody, to put in a system that you automatically know is going to be a cluster between weeks 1 and 2. I mean, this is only my second year, but I don't understand that. I don't get it.
I'm just trying to be really careful here. I mean, I'm first year commish, and
Oh, I
somebody
understand.
thinking, he's got an angle here, some kind of way. This is going to benefit the Bears.
Well,
That's why
yeah.
I not to vote.
And the bidding does work over to PFL. They're a Madden league, and it works very well. The way he got out of it, and I thought, it was probably a good way to do it for the more salary teams, but it doesn't work out exactly for our league like it does for the PFL. The way he got away from the last minute thing is he had a rule about how long he would wait to do his final bid, and then he would say, this bidding comes to a close in round 1 at Monday night between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern time, and nobody ever knew when. So, he'd just go in and blindly advance it at this time, and no one else could post after that. So no one knew exactly when the deadline was, because you're right, they'll camp there and wait.
I mean, it was a shame that Strat Draft that you and Doug couldn't make that work, because I thought that would solve a lot of issues.
Yeah, but it didn't work. So, I mean, it works for the draft. So that's all we have to do is just set up the draft for the free agents. Anyway, we're running out of time here. I think we covered everything, didn't we?
Just the rookie draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was
Andy's most important part.
Oh.
Got to get to Andy's most important part.
Andy's?
Yeah, Andy
Yeah.
wants to hear.
Oh.
And anybody who wants to say that Andy doesn't know about football because he didn't like to participate in the free agent draft, this rookie draft should have solved that. I thought between Andy and Don, they both had the best drafts out there. But when you can turn around and you can go into one rookie draft and basically have 3/5 of an offensive line going forward, and then also you have 2 starting, 2 guys who could be potential starting corners and a starting safety, that was really good. And then Don, he basically, I was sitting there looking at his thing this evening before I went on. Right now, if you went and continued the projections on his running backs that he drafted, he's got probably 2,500 yards of running backs. His problem is going to be being able to keep all these guys.
Yeah, I suspect he's going to hit the 120.
Yeah, I mean, he's got Walker, Pierce, and then Algier, who is getting a significant number of carries with Atlanta. Algier should easily be over 500 yards, and Walker and Pierce easily will be over 1,000 unless somebody gets hurt. And then we're not also talking. He's got Olave, and then when Jameson Williams comes back, he's going to have 2 stud wide receivers going forward. And again, he's also got some really good offensive linemen on there, our corners as well. So those guys. Tampa did really good in the later rounds, and then of course, obviously, I think Calvin in Kansas City.
Huh. Oh, you gotta like my Matt Corral pick in round 5 when I didn't care.
That was the one I'm staring at it right now, and that and Wan'Dale Robinson's not exactly bad at the end of round 3. So
I just figured I didn't know. I was on vacation. My last pick, I'm like, there's nobody left. I don't really care. I'll take Matt Corral.
Hey, IR him, and then bring in 2 years. I mean, in another league, I was sitting there in a rookie draft in the 4th round last year, and I drafted Travis Etienne. Obviously, he's not doing anything for me this year, but next year, yeah.
He joins my long list of people on IR though that haven't played a game.
Yeah.
3 tackles. Len hasn't probably been following on Slack. I've lost 3 tackles.
Wow. All right, guys. I think that's going to be it for tonight, and we're going to run low on time. So what we'll do is we'll disconnect and reconnect it to talk for a few after. Okay.
Perfect.
All right, guys. I think that's it. And where's my outro here? There it is. And I guess I don't know, 3 weeks from now, do it again.
That's our plan.
Yes, sir.
All right, everybody. We'll see you then. As we used to say in Old Mexico City, AMF. Adios, my friend. Bye-bye.